creepy neighbors. Story time about my extremely creepy neighbors. So a little background information, I was 12 years old and I was in 6th grade, and my family and I lived in a really small town where everyone knew everyone. But our new neighbors had been building their house next to us for the past 4 years. And finally, when they were done with the house, this house was huge. I mean, probably because there were like 8 people moving into the house. There was the mom, the dad, 4 kids, and their grandparents. So like 8 people. But I was super excited because I was like, okay, this is awesome. I get to meet some new friends. But after 2 weeks of not seeing anybody playing in the backyard or anybody on the school bus, I started to think that their family was super fucking weird. And everyone in our neighborhood liked to gossip, and everyone was saying how they barely see the people who had just moved in. So my mom decided to take one for the team and make some brownies, take them over to the house, and I ended up going with her. So we go up to the house, we knock on the door, and one of the kids came and opened the door, but the dad ran over and grabbed him. Like for part 2, creepy neighbors. So like I said, my mom and I took some brownies over there, and one of the kids opened the door, and when he opened the door, he had a bunch of bruises all over his body. The dad came running over and ripped his son from the door and slammed the door in our faces, and all you could hear was him screaming at his son. So my mom and I went to walk away before the door opened, and he was like, sorry, my son knows better than to open the door to strangers. So he took the brownies, and then I asked him if I could have a sleepover with one of his daughters, and he was super hesitant at first, but he said that I could only have a sleepover with her if it was at my house and not theirs, which my mom was completely fine with anyways, because she thought that it was a little bit weird that his son had bruises covering his whole body. So that night when she came over to sleep over my house, I asked her how her brother got all those bruises all over his body, and she said that he just fell down some stairs. But after that, we became best friends, and we would literally hang out like 5 times a week until the one day I knocked on their door to ask if she wanted to come over, and her dad answered the door and said that she was gone. Like for part 3, my super creepy neighbors. So like I said, I became best friends with their daughter, but the one day I went over her house to ask if she wanted to come over, and her dad answered the door and said that she was gone. And when I asked when she would be back, he was like, she went to go live with her mom, so probably never. Which was super weird because she never mentioned that she had another mom. So fast forward 2 months, my family and I are sitting around the fire pit when we hear someone scream help. But we weren't sure if that's what we were actually hearing because it was so quiet, and then all of a sudden we heard someone banging on my neighbor's basement door. You know those metal doors that people usually have outside of their house that lead down basement steps? Yeah, well that's where the banging was coming from. So my dad hopped over the fence to see if that's where the screaming was coming from also. And then not even a minute later, my dad hopped back over the fence, and it looked like he saw a ghost, but he ran inside, called 911. Because I was so young, the only thing my parents told me about that whole situation was that the girl that I was friends with was still alive, and her parents were keeping her in the basement along with 2 of her other siblings. But then we also found out that they weren't even her real parents. They were kidnapped at the hospital when they were born.
Hey, let me tell you guys about the time I got stabbed. Hey, what's up? My name is Ashley Callow. I used to be a competitive figure skater. Now I'm an actress, but I still skate for fun. Okay, so while I was skating competitively, everybody knew that the most important competition of the year was regionals, because every single state in your region, all of the girls at your level would compete against each other in one place. That's not nerve-wracking at all, right? Now, before you'd compete, everyone would try to get something called practice ice. So this is basically where if you were able to get it in time, before you'd compete, a couple days before or a day before, whenever it is, you would get to skate on that ice that you're competing on. The reason you'd want to do this is because every ice feels different. Some is more springy than others, some is just terrible, and yeah. So I was on one of these practice ices. I was about 9 years old at the time, and I was super nervous, but I was also on the ice with 20 to 30 other skaters, all any age, that were also super nervous. So when you have all of these skaters that are on the ice at once that are so nervous, nobody's thinking about what's going on around them. They're only thinking about their competition. Okay, the white mascara now has to set. So little 9-year-old me is skating every way possible, forwards, sideways, backwards, just so that I can get my little legs warmed up. So as I'm skating backwards to warm up, I suddenly feel this sharp stab in my back and I fall to the ice. I didn't realize it at the time, but apparently I was laying on the ice for 3 minutes. It felt like 2 seconds. So I finally get up and I realize everybody that was watching the practice ice starts clapping. And I'm like, for me? Because I thought it was just 2 seconds. It was my fault. Nobody else's fault, just mine, because I was so nervous. I was 9 years old. And I basically collided with this girl that was doing a camel spin, which is a spin where you're spinning super duper fast and your leg is up in the air behind you and your foot is turned out. So the toe pick got my back. I didn't have to get stitches. The Lord completely protected me. It was just a big scare. But yeah, that's the story of how I literally got stabbed in the back. Like this video if you'd like to
Story time. So when I was like 7 or 8, I used to always steal my mum's makeup. She would get so mad because I would legit steal it and not return it. So when she'd be looking for it, I would hide it just so she couldn't take it off of me. But she would soon find it stuffed in like this teddy bear that I had, and it had a little zip in it so you could hide things in there. Concealers, mascaras, and I even stole her skincare. I now understand the feeling of losing your favorite skincare because what you find works, and nothing replaces that. But at the time, I had no idea, and she would get so mad at me. So soon when I got a job, I started to buy my own makeup. But even then, not only did now my mum get mad at me for taking her makeup, she hated me buying it, so she would legit throw it away. She did not want me to wear it at all. But these makeup products were my genuine favourite, although I do believe they would break me out, and my skin would always look so dry and dull, and it's because I didn't know how to use my skincare properly. So one day I was walking down the street wondering how to get my glow back on. Wait, I'm running out of time. Go to part 2. This is part 2 on how my mum would legit throw away my makeup and my skincare. So like I was saying, not only did my mum hate me stealing her skincare makeup, but she also hated me wearing it. And I never understood how to actually look after my skin either, so I'd get the most clogged up pores. And one day I was walking down the street wondering how to get my glow back on because my skin looked so crusty and dry. And then I discovered how to use my skincare. Let me tell you now, double cleansing your skin and applying a serum before you apply your moisturizer gives you that glow that your skin needs. I'm now 19 and I understand the importance now, and investing into your skincare matters. So not only now do I understand why my mum would get so mad at me for stealing her products, but it also taught me the importance of looking after your skin and deep cleaning your skin. So I honestly think she didn't like me wearing it because she knew it would ruin my skin if I did not use it properly. And you honestly need to find the right products for you. So don't lose your glow, use your skincare. So maybe my mum was right. It taught me a lesson, to say the least.
Story time about the girl who left me unconscious in the girls' bathroom. So a little background information. I was pretty young at the time. I was in 7th grade and I was 11 years old. And there was this girl who we're gonna call Jenna. Jenna hated me for absolutely no fucking reason. She would bully me because I had red hair, and she would text me literally every day at the same time, telling me to off myself and how I was weird and how nobody liked me. One day she randomly started being nice to me. She sat with me at lunch and her water bottle was empty, and she asked if I needed mine filled up too. Stupidly, I said yes. Well, she ended up putting drugs in my water bottle. After like 20 minutes, I started feeling sick, so I went to the bathroom, and I was kneeling over the toilet when everything went black. Well, when I didn't come back from the bathroom, my teacher got worried, so she sent security looking for me. They were banging on my stall. Obviously, I was fucking unconscious, so I didn't answer. So then they called the fire department, the police, the ambulance were all there. Like for part 2. Part 2 about the girl who left me unconscious in the girls' bathroom. So like I said, the fire department was there, the police, the ambulance. They called the fire department because they couldn't get the door off. And when they removed it, it fell on me. So I was injured and unconscious. And just a little background information on this girl, who mind you was literally 11 years old. She had a 3 criminal record and was recently in prison for 5 days. Or juvie, whatever the heck you want to call it. Because she brought a knife to school and tried to stab some kid who had called her fat the day before. Anyways, back to the story. I wake up 4 days later. My mom's sitting next to me. They put Abby in jail for 13 years for suspicion of attempted murder, and she was kicked out of school. And now I'm homeschooled and failing all my classes. I now have seizures because of the drugs that she gave me. So yeah.
And his best friend won't leave me alone. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. My husband and I were married for almost a decade. During that time, we had 2 kids. And of course, his passing was completely devastating to our families. And 2 weeks after my husband died, I was still grieving. But his best friend started coming around our house a lot. First, he was very emotional. Him and my husband were best friends for about 7 years. They saw each other almost every day. Not only did they work together, but they also would go to the gym together and pretty much hang out all the time. So I know this guy really, really well. When my husband would invite him over, I never got the feeling that he liked me. I mean, sure, sometimes I caught him staring at me, but I'm beautiful, so I understand. So after my husband passed, he started coming over as in, I want to take care of you, and we would just kind of cry together. I took this as his way of trying to help my husband, you know, so I just thought he was being really sweet. But exactly 1 month after my husband passed away, he started asking me weird questions. Number 1, do you want to start dating again? Number 2, don't you feel lonely at night? Number 3, you're still so young and beautiful. You need to give yourself a chance with someone else. Mind you, I'm still grieving. To these questions, I would usually say no. Obviously, I mean, why would I even be thinking about those things? I didn't put too much mind to the questions, but a few days later, he came over after he had been at a bar. As soon as I opened the door to him, he said, "Can I kiss you?" And then he did without me saying yes. Part 2 is
Story time about the girl who faked assault for attention. So a little background information, I was 15 and it was my sophomore year of high school. So we're gonna call this girl Carly. Well, every week this girl would come in with some sort of bruise or cut on her. Me being a decent human being, I would ask her what happened. Well, every week she would either say that somebody beat her up or she was SA'd by this one guy who took a video of them while they were doing the nasty. But you could completely tell that it was not against her will. Well, everybody would believe her because always believe the victim. Well, the same thing happened again with a different boy. Everybody saw the video, and I'm talking like people from different schools. So it got into a routine of her telling us how she would have to get abortions every month. So fast forward, I head to my first class of the day, which was English. Well, I look over at her because she sits right next to me, and I see a huge bruise on her neck. Like it looked like somebody had been choking her. Now, her and I weren't in the same friend group, but we were kind of friends. So I lean over and ask her what happened, like for part 2. Part 2 about the girl who faked assault for attention. So like I said, we were sitting in English class and I look over at her and she has this big bruise on her neck and it looked like somebody choked her. So I leaned over to her and I asked her what happened, and she said the guy who was in the video with her, the most recent video, he SA'd her. So I tell her to come to the bathroom with me before the bell rang. So we go in and I immediately grab a paper towel and put it under some water with some soap, and I go to put it on her neck. And she starts screaming and like ducking and swerving. Well, I ended up swiping her neck with the paper towel. And there is makeup all on this paper towel, and the bruise is just like smudged all over her neck. So I was like, what the hell is wrong with you? She told me not to tell anyone, and that was her way of making friends, even though this girl had plenty of friends. So when we got back to class, the bruise had a completely different shape, and she changed her story to me beating the shit out of her in the bathroom because she slept with my non-existent boyfriend. 3 years later, she is still doing the same exact shit. Story time about my unhealthy obsession with my ex-boyfriend. So a little background information, I was 18 and in 12th grade, and him and I had been dating for about 4 years, and it was around Thanksgiving, so it was pretty much college decision time. I got accepted into UCLA and I was really happy because it was super close to home, and my boyfriend, who we're gonna call Devin, got accepted there also. So I was super excited that we did not have to do the long distance thing, until a week later he calls me, and apparently he got some soccer scholarship, so now he's going to Berkeley. So I was like, okay, maybe we can make long distance work. Well, then he tells me that he doesn't want to make it work and he thinks that we should just break up. Well, a week after that, him and I were sleeping together again. So I thought that meant that we were back together. The one day I was leaving his house and I heard his mom talking about me, and she was like, oh, is she coming to the Christmas party? And I was super, super happy. Until Devin says, oh, we're not together anymore and I'm thinking of inviting a different girl. Well, a week later, the party rolls around and I decide that I'm gonna show up anyways. Life about my unhealthy obsession with my ex-boyfriend. So like I said, he thought that he was bringing some random girl to his Christmas party, and I decided that I was gonna show up there anyways. So I'm sitting in the car outside of his house the day of the Christmas party, pretty much just giving myself a little pep talk. Eventually I go up, I knock on the door, his dad answers, gives me a big hug, and tells me that he's downstairs with all of his cousins playing the video game. So I go downstairs, and as soon as I get down the stairs, all of his cousins look at me, and they give me the look of like, oh shit, she is not supposed to be here right now. And then I see the bathroom door closed with the light on. So I walk over, open the door, and what do I see? A girl from our school giving my boyfriend head. Well, my ex-boyfriend, but still, he was my boyfriend. So I didn't even give her time to get up before I started wailing on her. A few punches and kicks later, my boyfriend starts screaming in pain. After that, I got kicked out of the house, and I had to pay some medical bills because she bit my boyfriend. And I'm still on probation for beating her ass.
But how I'm still engaged after 16 years. My fiance asked me to marry him when I was 20 years old and I am now 36. It's been that long. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I've sent me on Instagram. Let's call my fiance Ted. Ted is a great guy, aside from the fact that he pushes back our wedding date all the time. A little backstory. We are both very career-driven people. We both work very hard and travel for our jobs. He works on Wall Street and I work for a beauty conglomerate. We're very wealthy, so we could be having kids right now if we wanted to. But of course, he says that we should wait until we get married. Every time I bring up the fact that we still haven't gotten married after 16 years, he gets annoyed and upset. Worst of all, we barely spend time together because we both work so much. I started getting really suspicious because of how many times he's pushed back the wedding. So I decided to do some research. When we first got engaged, he told me the ring was worth $45,000. I got it appraised and it turns out it's a fake ring, and it's only worth $200. Part 2 of how I'm still engaged after 16 years. After I found out the ring was fake, I came up with a plan to confront my fiance. I made sure to get home earlier than he did. When he came into the apartment, I was standing right by our balcony. He comes over to me and gives me a kiss. Then I take off the engagement ring and I throw it over the balcony. He pretended like he was freaking out. That's when I told him I got the ring appraised and that it was a fake, and that it was only worth $200 instead of the $45,000 he told me he spent. The man was too stunned to speak. I could tell he was trying to come up with some lie in his head, so I gave him a minute to think. Then he says that he bought the ring from a friend who's a jeweler, and that he must have scammed him out of the $45,000. After 45 minutes of arguing, I was exhausted. I decided to go to sleep. I woke up a few hours later and I overhear him on the phone. That's when I heard him say she knows that the ring is fake and I think she knows about us. Part 3 of how I'm still engaged after 16 years. That's when I hear my fiance on the phone saying, I think she knows about us. My heart sank to my stomach. I stood there and listened to the rest of the conversation. He was whispering, so it was hard to make out. All I could hear was, I'll have to tell her the truth now. I went back to our room and pretended to be asleep. He comes in and wakes me up and tells me that he has to talk to me. That's when he starts telling me everything. He said when he asked me to marry me, he had every intention of doing so. But the more he traveled, the further he felt away from me. That's when he told me he met someone in his travels, and that he'd been seeing this woman for 10 years. He even had a house with her in a different city. It turns out that every time he would travel, it was only to see her. My world was completely shattered.